Good evening to you all, and welcome to the Falls Church City Council meeting of Monday, November 27th, 2017. If you could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, you call roll, please.
Yes, sir. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Ms. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
Mr. Z?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Do we have a motion regarding the meeting agenda?
I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Before we get started, I would like to thank our city clerk, Celeste Heath, for helping organize a very nice tree lighting ceremony in the downtown. I think it was a great event, and I know you put a lot of time and effort into it, so I want to thank you for that. And also would like to thank Mr. Duncan and Ms. Hardy, who are on the Economic Development Committee, for organizing and getting the trees and the lights in the trees and advancing that cause. That's good. But anyway, that was a great job, I think, all around, and hopefully it'll attract a lot of interest to our downtown. So it was a really nice event. We've got a couple proclamations I thought we'd get started with. The first is regarding Green Home certification recognition. And Mr. Shields, do we have a proclamation regarding that, or are we just going to read out the certificates? Or how's this going to work?
What we'd like to do is just recognize the winners this year, and Mr. Doug Frazier is here to present those who've been so honored, and I believe we have the homeowners here as well.
Yeah, this is the Green Home Awards. I'm very proud of our award recipients. Let's see, do we have Adam Bean tonight? I guess Adam couldn't make it, but we have 3 awards. We have Andrew Schroeder and Schroeder Design Build. And I think we have a picture. Offutt Drive. You can see that. But this is a remodel and addition in general overall remodel, right? That's right. And whole house remodel. And this was done with the National Green Building Standard. And it was verified and received the bronze, right? Bronze certification with the National Green Building Standard. And it was quite an effort, I guess, to go through. It also achieved Energy Star certification, which Energy Star certification, I believe, is 15 to 30% better efficiency than code minimum. So congratulations. I think it's a big deal. This is a good thing. We also have 2 other awards for houses that were built by Adam Bean and Celebrity Homes. This is 308 Pennsylvania Avenue. This also achieved the National Green Building Standard Bronze Award and Energy Star certification. It's a new house. And then this is also Adam Bean and Celebrity Homes. This is 1017 Fowler Street. So these are 2 new homes that also use the same certification standard. So these are third-party people that come in and check and verify that a whole wide range of things have been done to make sure they're healthy, energy efficient, and good, more sustainable. So anyway, well done. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, Tim Stevens, and just very briefly on behalf of the city's Energy Committee, Virginia has a relatively weak residential building code. So it's left up to homeowners on a voluntary basis to pursue a third-party program to fill in the gaps that the state code doesn't provide. So the homeowner benefits because they get a more efficient home and they'll save money over time, but the city also benefits because a home that's more efficient has fewer greenhouse gas emissions, and it will help the city overall reach its goal of an 80% reduction by 2050. So thanks to Doug for having this program. Thank you for giving a little bit of time to give this some recognition, and thanks most of all to the homeowners for making the extra effort to build an energy-efficient home.
Thank you all. And I tell you, we've got some certificates for you all if you would like to come up, and maybe your wife, you can come on back in. Is Adam Bean here? I see his dad, Wiley Bean, but I don't see. I think I see Wiley. Is that not Wiley there in the middle? No, I'm sorry. It looked like Wiley. I thought it was. My apologies. But Adam's not here, I guess. All right. Well, let's give these awards to you all here.
Great.
Regarding Marymount University and their senior education program. Mr. Shields, is there anyone here from Marymount who might want to tell us a little bit about it, or how's this going to work?
We do. Ms. Ellen Gross is here, and Ms. Ellen Salzberg, I'm sorry, is here, and she will speak to this program. And we do have other participants in the program. We also have representatives of Marymount University here as well.
Good evening. I'm Ellen Salisbury, 502 West Broad Street. We're pleased to recognize tonight a partnership between Marymount University and the Senior Center. Through the efforts of myself and Debbie Massey as community volunteers, we have been able to coordinate a program that has brought a very valuable resource to seniors in Falls Church. There's some very important partners in this relationship. Tracy Browning, Senior Center Director, who couldn't be here tonight, Danny Schlitz, Director of Recreation and Parks, and Marshall Webster from the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library. They're very important partners in this relationship, and I also want to mention Pam Spofford, another community volunteer who has just been unbelievably helpful in every aspect of this partnership. So I want, first of all, to express our gratitude to the city for the support that we have gotten from the Senior Center for this partnership. But tonight we want to put the real spotlight on Marymount University and especially recognize the commitment of President Matthew Shank, who also couldn't be here tonight. We've been very fortunate to work with Bridget Murphy, who is the Associate Provost of Academic Affairs, who has served as our liaison to the faculty at Marymount. And we are also happy to acknowledge the generosity of the faculty volunteers who have been the pillars of this program. The discussions of this partnership began in late 2013, and starting in the spring of 2014, we've had classes that featured professors discussing a very wide range of topics, everything from downsizing to technology to, just recently this past fall, press and politics. And for each one of these classes, our valuable partner from the library, Marshall Webster, has come in and has provided a bibliography of materials in the library that relate to the particular content of the course that's being taught. Our current class is called Books, From the Beginning to the Digital Age, which is taught by Bridget Murphy. For this class, Marshall brought in a large collection of books about books. In addition, in connection with our technology classes, he has offered one-on-one sessions for seniors if they need assistance with personal IT devices. And actually, I don't think that's limited to seniors. If you're having a problem, you can schedule something with Marshall. Now, these courses at the Community Center are offered free of charge. The reputation of the program has grown so that for almost every single class, we have a waiting list. So far, we've had 11 different faculty members involved with the classes. We've had a total of over 220 enrollments in 8 classes, and that's not including registrations for upcoming classes that will be taught in February and May. A special favorite of the seniors is Dr. Diane Murphy. She's chair of the IT department at Marymount. She brings in graduate students to assist us in our technology classes. She has so far taught 5 classes with another scheduled, and as a result, we seniors are much more comfortable with technology and social media. We're even texting. She has provided certificates of completion for seniors to show to their grandchildren, and she has relieved technology anxiety for many of us. She gets special credit for teaching several IT classes at the Community Center before it was wired for Wi-Fi. That is no easy task. We're pleased to have with us tonight Bridget Murphy and Dr. Diane Murphy, who is our local hero. Even though President Shank couldn't be here tonight, we want to acknowledge his unwavering support of this partnership. At this time, we'd like to have Mayor Tarter present a plaque of appreciation to the Marymount faculty members who are represented here tonight by Bridget Murphy and Diane Murphy. The city is grateful for their contributions personally to this program and to all the Marymount University faculty whose contributions to this partnership have enhanced the lives of our seniors. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of your great work for our community or to our community. So we really appreciate it. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak from Marymount, or would you like to come forward and receive the plaque? It's up to you all. If there's anything else you want to say, you're certainly welcome to if you'd like, but otherwise, would you like to say anything, ma'am?
Yeah, I'll say something. Why not? First of all, we are not related in any way. Okay, believe it or not. We're the only 2 Murphys at Marymount. As I said, I'm Diane Murphy, and I've been working with the seniors in technology. Okay? And it's really fascinating for me in technology to be able to work with seniors who really want to use the technology, mainly promoted by their grandchildren and children. And so it's been very satisfying to see them develop some skills, not great skills, but some skills as we go through the program. So our next event will be in February, and we're going to do smart homes. And we will look at how I believe technology can help seniors stay in their home and make things more efficient. So we've done cell phones, we've done computers, we've done social media, we've done a whole variety of different things. For me, it's an extremely enjoyable occasion from teaching 18-year-olds who may or may not want to be in the classroom to have the senior citizens who are thoroughly engaged and thoroughly enjoying themselves. So it's been very satisfying for me to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your service to our community. Why don't you all come forward and receive the plaque then?
If we could ask Danny Schlitt to come forward as well. All of our senior programs
Marshall as well?
and Marshall.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read
If they're
this while
elaborate.
you're coming forward. It says, in appreciation of Marymount University faculty volunteers for exceptional generosity and expertise in providing outstanding practical and academic classes that enrich the lives of seniors through the Falls Church Senior Center. You all. Okay, Madam Clerk, do we have any oaths of office to administer?
We do not.
All right, let's move on to public comment. You want to start with the written comments?
Yes, sir. Lana Mirowick wrote to express concern about continued tax increases. Kristen Stamilio recommended a large auditorium in the new high school to accommodate school and outside events. The Environmental Sustainability Council recommended environmentally sustainable items for the RFP for the campus project. And Julie Harrison of 1220 Ellison Street expressed concern about tree removal plans at the Railroad Avenue Cottage site.
All right, thank you very much. So I've got some speaker slips here. If anyone in the audience has not filled one out but would like to speak, you need to go ahead and get one of these slips from the lobby. And we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes, and please state your name and address for the record. Our first speaker is Christopher McLeod, followed by Andrew Young. Welcome.
My name is Chris McLeod. I'm at 824 Villa Ridge Road in Falls Church. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I rise today in support of the inclusion of a net zero provision in the RFP for the new high school. A net zero school would offer the lowest life cycle costs to our community, offer additional learning opportunities to the future generations of our community, and be a source of pride for both the community and the kids who attend it. It would also offer a healthier environment. Arlington has already shown with its Discovery School that this can be done in time and under budget. Many school districts in the area have expressed their intention to follow Arlington's lead, but Falls Church has the opportunity to be at the forefront of this movement and show itself to be a leader on this front. I have personally experienced the benefits that come with the Green School. The environmental science building on campus at the University of Vermont, where I attended, was LEED Platinum. It had far better ventilation and lighting than conventional buildings on campus, and some of the lowest carbon dioxide concentrations measured in classrooms. High carbon dioxide concentrations are correlated with lower oxygen intake and difficulties staying awake and focusing in class. It was far easier to focus in the classes there than it was in the conventional buildings on the campus. It also offered additional learning opportunities, computers that tracked energy and heating consumption and compared them to a comparable building that was not built to LEED standards. Along with the Davis Center, the first LEED Gold student union in the country, it was a source of immense pride on campus. And Arlington has noted a similar effect among students at the Discovery School. Students are excited to go there. They want to spend every minute possible there. During a recent ESC hearing, one panel member testified that students have opted to return to the school for as few as 30 minutes at the end of the day after having to leave for appointments. Let's give our future generations and their teachers here in Falls Church the opportunity to share in that pride in a 21st century learning environment that the building itself can provide far better than conventional buildings can, in which to study and advance their skills. The schools are the heart of our community and a reflection of our community values. Do we not value an environment that our future generations can be healthy in, take pride in, and can truly bring out the best of their abilities and set them up for the most success possible? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Our next speaker is Andrew Young, followed by Gary Laporta. Welcome.
So my name's Andy Young. I live at 615 Poplar Drive. I've been a citizen of Falls Church with my wife and 2 girls for the last 3.5 years, and I've been a member of the Environmental Sustainability Council. You'll hear from us a little bit tonight, since May of this year. In my day job, I oversee facility operations and construction activities for a large federal agency in DC, and I wanted to offer a couple of thoughts tonight on the new high school project. I'm encouraged by the administrator's proposal of forming a committee to sort out high-level goals and decisions. The challenge will be keeping this group high-level and not micromanaging details, but the stakeholder mix for this effort makes this type of oversight arrangement a good idea. Additionally, I want to advocate for a city employee with the relevant experience in construction projects of similar size and scope to be the project executive for the new high school. If we don't have that person on board already, I'd recommend considering a term position, find the right individual to bring into the city without having a long-term personnel commitment. While a contractor can technically perform portions of the PM role, in my experience, it pays off to have a government employee empowered to make decisions and advocate for the government's interests. To address concerns about spending too much money on these types of project management costs, I'd recommend considering combining the project management teams of all the projects we've got going on across the city, be them with the city or with the school system. This is the best way to leverage scarce expertise and administrative resources. The challenge is, not letting the bureaucratic structure between the two parts of the government to kind of get in the way of unnecessary inefficiencies. Going forward, the risks to the city are all related to execution. The citizens of Falls Church have taken the resource question off the table. The best way to mitigate risk is to put empowered resources in place to achieve the city's goals. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Our next speaker is Gary Laporta, followed by Melissa Morris. Okay. Melissa Morris?
Thank you. My name is Melissa Morse. I live at 124 Chanel Terrace, apartment 201 here in the city of Falls Church, and I have been a resident here for 20 years. I'm here tonight to publicly invite everyone to Falls Church Tree Fest, which occurs this coming weekend. Falls Church Tree Fest is an event that I have done for the last 4 years. The purpose of it is to bring awareness and raise money for many nonprofits in the Falls Church area who provide an important service to the citizens of the area. And I wanted to make reference to the fact that the event this year is larger than ever. We have 15 nonprofit organizations that are represented at the event. Each of these organizations is coming to the event with a decorated tree for viewers to bid on, and the winning bidder is going to make that donation to the nonprofit. There is a sneak peek event on Thursday night, November 30th from 4:30 to 7:30, and it's going to be located at 700 West Broad Street this year. It's going to be in the Falls Church Arts Gallery space along with the future Falls Church Arts Cafe space. I've been very fortunate in the 4 years I've done this event to have partners who have been willing to step up and provide promotion and venue for this event, for which I am grateful. Mr. B, I'm glad you're sitting here in the room, because the first year I did this event, the Falls Church News Press was instrumental in promoting the event and developing a good audience for it. It was a first-time event, and I appreciated the support at the time. This year, the Kensington Falls Church is a sponsor. Falls Church Arts is a sponsor, and they have been good about promoting the program and encouraging participation. And I just wanted to remind everyone that it's this weekend, and I hope you can be there. The website for the event, if you need more information or would like to see the 15 groups that are participating this year, is simply fallschurchtreefest.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate it very much. Our last speaker at the present time, at least, is Corey Weiss. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here tonight. I'm Corey Weiss, 603 Knollwood Drive. I live there along with my husband and 2 kids, and we've been there for 9 years now. And I'm the chair of the Environmental Sustainability Council, so I'd like to just compliment some of the comments made by my colleagues already this evening. Chris McLeod has very nicely testified to the personal benefits of a zero-energy school. There's a lot of research that substantiates his personal experience in a zero-energy school. And I just wanted to compliment those remarks. So based on discussions that we heard last week at City Council's work session, I understand that the school board is considering including zero-energy ready, geothermal, and LEED Gold as project goals in the RFQ for the George Mason High School project. I'm very encouraged to see that, and I look forward to seeing a copy of the RFQ at some point. A zero energy or a zero energy ready school will be very good for our wallets, for our children, and for the environment. From the standpoint of our wallets, the City of Falls Church is going to own this building for a long time. So it's essential that we focus on the total cost of owning this building over its lifetime. Just as a quick note, I know City Council and School Board have heard this term more and more of late, but for anybody else who's not familiar with what zero energy means, a zero energy building is a building that's designed to produce as much energy as it consumes. In other words, it's a highly energy efficient building. It consumes very little energy. And what energy it does consume is typically produced from sustainable sources such as solar panels. A zero energy school will significantly reduce our annual utility costs. Neighboring Arlington County's Discovery Elementary School reports that it avoids $120,000 in utility costs every year as a result of its zero energy school. And if we use a geothermal system to provide the energy for the school, we could save on annual maintenance costs as well. In fact, a Council of Governments study estimates that even though geothermal systems often have higher upfront costs than other energy systems, the payback due to annual savings with operations and maintenance cost is about 6 to 9 years, which is very little in the context of a 30 to 60 year long-lived asset. It's critical that we apply long-term thinking when we design and fund this school. Why waste energy and money when we can design a highly efficient, low-energy consuming building that will last for decades into the future? This is an important investment in our children. As Chris has already mentioned, there are personal educational benefits for the students. But even more important for our children's futures, a zero-energy ready building will emit far fewer greenhouse gases than a conventional building. Nationally, buildings are responsible for about 40% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, and in the City of Falls Church, it's more like half of our greenhouse gas emissions. The city has committed to reducing our own greenhouse gas emissions by 80% versus 2005 levels by 2050. Building a zero-energy school will make a huge step forward towards making progress towards that goal. Is that my timer? Okay, all right, so I'll end there. I just want to support Andy Young's comments as well on getting the right capabilities to manage this project. We hope that the construction manager who manages the project is a lead accredited professional and has had experience with similar projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership on the ESC. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at this time? Okay, well, let's go ahead. We're going to move on then to council requests. Are there any council requests? All right. Let's move on to the report of the city manager. Mr. Shields?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I do have a couple requests. Can I have 2 minutes to make
Of course.
First of all, I met with a constituent, Chuck Murray, who heads the Fairfax Water system, and he provided some slides, which I want to provide to the city manager and make generally available. He's a constituent and is very interested in the tank project around Eden Center. The second thing I wanted to mention is an article that appeared in the Washington Post entitled "Houses Burn Faster These Days, So Get Out Fast." And to just give you a short summary of the article, if you're like 80% of Americans surveyed, you'll say 5 or 10 minutes to leave. Wrong, according to Underwriters Laboratories. You have 3 minutes to get out. And that's based upon new construction, which involves large open spaces and highly flammable materials, both in the interior and exterior. So I wanted to provide this and see if there isn't some additional public education we should be doing. The third thing I wanted to raise is that one of the area hospitals has picked up a national program called Stop the Bleed, which is for general members of the public to be able to do really basic first aid in the case of mass shootings and things of that sort. And I would be interested in the city potentially partnering with one or more organizations to sponsor that program generally for our citizens. So those are all my requests. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan?
Just one thing, the article in the Post today about bus rapid transit in Maryland had some interesting information in it. We've talked about BRT here, but I had not seen some of the techniques and devices that they're talking about using on Route 29, explained and discussed the way they were in the article. I just wondered if the staff could crosswalk what our plans are here for BRT with what they're doing in Maryland, and at some point, maybe in the new year, give us a update on if the plans that we're talking about here are similar to what they're trying to do in Maryland. Thanks.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, let me provide a quick answer. The answer to Councilmember Duncan is yes, but it's very important, and perhaps a briefing on the bus rapid transit program in the near future might be very useful. Thanks.
All right. Mr. Shields, the report of City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. A few things to report on a scheduling note. One, later on in tonight's meeting, we will have a briefing by Superintendent Dr. Peter Noonan on the draft RFQ. The school board will be briefed again on Tuesday night, and the intention is to get your comments on that, and the goal is to release that RFQ this week. And so that will happen later in tonight's meeting. I'd also like to just report, we had originally scheduled to have on council's agenda tonight action with respect to the City Hall project and review and council's consideration of a contract with HIT Construction for the City Hall project. We're still working with the contractor, and we anticipate that we'll have an update at your next work session on December 4th and request consideration of that at your last meeting of the year on December 11th. On that December 4th meeting, our next work session, the majority of our work session will be a joint session with the school board to discuss FY19 preliminary forecasts for revenues and expenditures, and have a budget planning session jointly with the City Council and the school board. So again, that's at your next work session night on December 4th. Lastly, I would just note for the December 11th City Council meeting, we are planning to have a reception for our outgoing council member, Ms. Oliver, and for our new incoming council member-elect, Mr. Ross Litgenhouse. And so we'll schedule that for December 11th, and we'll have the swearing in as well that night.
And all of our newly elected.
And all of our newly re-elected members.
Re-elected.
Thank you.
Yes.
Then the council's organizational meeting, your first meeting of the new year, will then be on Tuesday on January 2nd, the holiday being January 1st, which is a Monday, so we'll push it to the Tuesday. That's all I have to report tonight. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? If not, let's move on to business on the agenda. Madam Clerk?
Yes, our first item is TO 17-13, ordinance to amend Chapter 26, Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Article 3, City Vehicle License of the Code of the City of Falls Church to add a new Section 26-74, imposing a license tax on vehicles that do not display current Virginia license plates.
All right, Mr. Shields.
Mayor Tarter, members of council, will ask our Commissioner of Revenue, Mr. Tom Clinton, to provide the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter, Vice Mayor Connolly, and the City Council members. We're bringing before you a first reading of an ordinance addressing out-of-state license plates, which we have calculated what's in our database, and then there's also some that we don't know about that we're trying to get a handle on. Among the principles of a civilized society are obeying the laws of the state in which you live in this case, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and contributing one's fair share of the taxes needed to fund the operation of the jurisdiction in which one resides. The intent of this ordinance is to encourage our residents to do both. A Virginia code grants authority to a locality to adopt an ordinance that imposes a license tax in an amount not to exceed $100 annually upon the owners of motor vehicles which do not display current Virginia license plates and which are not otherwise exempted from the requirements of displaying such license plates. Also pursuant to Virginia Code, every person who owns a motor vehicle, trailer or semi-trailer, before operating on any highway in Virginia shall register with the DMV and obtain a certificate of title. And they'll need to display their DMV-issued license plates accordingly. Virginia Code states that a resident, owner of a car, truck, or motorcycle, which is duly registered for the current calendar year in another state or country, may operate such vehicle for the first 30 days of residents in Virginia without registering the car. So they built in some time to kind of get, to the DMV and get things registered without paying any fees to the Commonwealth. Motor vehicles of active duty service members and or their spouses from another state who are residing in the City of Falls Church due to military orders are exempt from the City of Falls Church personal property, Virginia state licensing, and registration taxation. So there's built-in exemptions, especially for military, which is very clear. The ultimate goal of the ordinance is to encourage compliance with city and state licensing and registration laws, although there may be some individuals that are willing to pay the additional $100 a year and not comply with state licensing requirements. We currently have 355 vehicles, 70 which are military exempt, registered in the city with out-of-state plates. This is 2.7% of the total cars registered. The owners of these vehicles enjoy the use of city services such as snow plowing, street maintenance, and other services, as do all our residents. Our aim is to ensure that these vehicle owners comply with state code and contribute to the continued operation of our city. Administratively, we do have a difficult time tracking vehicles with out-of-state plates, and they often leave the city as we only have access to the Virginia DMV. We don't have access to 50 states. A lot of times these vehicles leave owing the city money. The treasurer estimates that currently we have some $25,000 in past due receivables from out-of-state vehicles. We are investigating the expense of having access to a national 50-state database to help get information to assist in the recovering of this revenue. We believe the additional expense of this access will pay for itself very quickly. Each of our surrounding jurisdictions already have the $100 tax in place. Both Alexandria and Fairfax County have an additional penalty of $250 for a total of $350 for not registering a vehicle in Virginia, which is allowed for vehicles not registered within 30 days per the Virginia Code. We're asking for your approval tonight with the second reading at your December 11th meeting. We would like to have this be effective March 1st, 2018, giving us time to advertise the change and educate our citizens. I'd like to thank Gary Laporta, who did some of the background research on this, and we obviously have been working closely with Jody Acosta, our treasurer, because anything that we assess in the commissioner's office is collected by the treasurer. Certainly, ready to answer any questions you have about the proposal.
All right. Questions, Ms. Hardy?
Hi, thanks for joining us. Just a quick confirmation. I recall from work session that all of our neighboring jurisdictions already have something similar in place.
Yes.
And similar fee structure as well?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Some are higher. We think $100 is reasonable.
Okay, so we're not out of line compared to everyone else. Thank you.
Mr. Duncan? Then Mr.
Thank you. Maybe this is a question for the city attorney. What does the term residence mean, within 30 days of residence? Is that a term of law? What does one do to establish residence or not do?
I can't recite them right now, but I think there are a number of factors that are considered. If you're wherever you're permanently staying, if you own the home and you're living there every day. I would have to look up exactly what the factors are that are considered.
Okay, it's good that we have lead time on this, I think, because there'll be an opportunity for education for those 300-some folks. First, the military people who are exempt, they need to know that for sure. That needs to be clear in all of our communications. But then others who may be here temporarily, or what they see as temporarily, providing care for a family member, or I don't know, on some sort of 30 or 40-day, work assignment that is not such that they expect to establish residence, but yet they are here longer than 30 days. So, which leads me to the question of all the other jurisdictions around us have this, so of course we should too, but all the other jurisdictions around us are not the little city. So for cases where exceptions need to be granted, describe for me, if you would, Mr. Commissioner, the process that a citizen would go through to, let's say, my mother-in-law is here to take care of somebody in my family for a couple of months. They're recuperating from an illness. What does my mother-in-law do to establish herself as exempt from at least the city's obligations? I'm not sure if there's anything we can do to to make her exempt from the state's obligations, but that's why I asked the first question. What about city's obligation? Because when you say $25,000, you mean that's money that we are not collecting that is, property taxes, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
so.
It's harder to track people that have out-of-state plates because we don't have access to that database. So if they were in Virginia in the database, we'd be able to track them better and collect better. That's something that Jody has confirmed, and we know from our experience. But a lot of code is gray, right? It'd be a lot easier if it was black or white. So there are exceptions. There's hospice situations. There's disabled, parents or children, or lots of different, 24-hour nursing that, some of our residents have. So we've run across almost every example, but there's always probably a few more that we haven't. And we can take that in consideration for either getting them an adhesive decal for their windshield to make that simpler for them. And we also have temporary decals that can be punched out by month. So if we verify that they shouldn't be paying taxes here, they meet some of the residency tests and those types of things, we have a lot of, I'd say the number 2 thing we probably have is State Department people, that are here, basically on work orders, and we work with them. Some of them are from states where they do pay a car tax, and some of them are from states that don't. And so we take that into consideration whether they pay a tax. We want them to come in and talk to us, and then we can analyze the situation, explain the code to them, and then take it from there.
Okay, again, an opportunity for, public education. I mean, the scenario that I'm thinking of is, grandma's here taking care of the twins. She's from out of state. She doesn't plan to establish residence here, but she's here for longer than 30 days. What I hear Mr. Clinton saying is that we can make arrangements for her not to have to pay city property tax because she's just a temporary visitor to the city. But I'm not sure how you get around the 30-day thing with the state to establish her as requiring to get state plates. And am I describing a scenario that?
Again, and I haven't looked at the question of what technically makes a residence. However, I believe that it's likely that somebody who's here for, say, 60 days but has a permanent residence elsewhere and fully intends to go back to that permanent residence would not be determined ultimately to be a resident who would have to change their plates. They'd be visiting here for 2 months as long as they have a residence elsewhere.
And unless.
But again, it depends. There's a number of factors that get looked at to determine that.
Okay, well, unless there's some state enforcement authority that steps in and, initiates a discussion by giving a ticket or whatever, basically, we're more likely to find out on day 40 that grandma's been here taking care of the twins, and she can come in and talk to, Jody or Tom. We can work things out. But the state plate issue, just again, between now and when we actually implement this, it would be helpful just for people to know, because every one of those exceptions that Mr. Clinton indicated, those are real-life examples. Hospice, elder care, child care, rotating care for an elderly person who's a resident here of his or her children. And now, here in Falls Church, we want to make exceptions where those are proper. Thank you.
Yeah, and that would be nothing new. We do that every day without this ordinance, trying to figure out, how long they're going to be here, what's the situation, temporary decal, permanent decal, some way of knowing when they leave, those types of things we can ascertain from, the visitor, the guest, the caregiver, et cetera, and we can put that in our database so we know the situation. The treasurer's office would know the situation. And of course, we talk to the police department too. Some of this would involve tickets, and, we work through that process already, trying to figure out, what is the situation, and our code is 60 days to register your vehicle. So the state is 30 days to title a vehicle, and our code is 60 days. Because what we found is a lot of time if you buy a car out of state, it takes almost 30 full days to get your title and your plates. So we, and we can always go backward. So it's not a problem.
All right, Mr. Z.
Thank you, Mayor. I wonder, of our adjoining jurisdictions, have they had this provision, this law, this ordinance in place for a while now?
Almost 10 years in Arlington. Arlington was the first, Fairfax County, Alexandria, and Loudon is on the verge of approving. I think they've gone to first reading and about to pass it shortly. So we're talking to our colleagues in those offices, seeing what the lessons are learned, and we have time, before it goes into effect. And ultimately, it has to prove itself that they're not, titling their vehicle in Virginia. It wouldn't be the first day, it would be after some time and some investigation. That would be the final conclusion.
And do we have any history on how well it's working in those jurisdictions? Or are they getting the kind of compliance or revenue that they
Yes,
expect?
I think we're finding that it's a part of the tool. It's not the silver bullet to collect all the revenue from all the cars that you should, but it's a number of things that we use on a daily basis, and the Treasurer uses as well. Because assessing is one thing, and then collecting is another part of it too. And most of it's education. That's what we found, that most people need to be educated about. If they're coming from another state, this is, maybe foreign to them. Every state does things differently. Once we explain the code and the procedure, and they get in the system, it becomes very routine.
Well, I don't want to be the one that would be supportive of being the only little city that is the haven and bedrock of scofflaws. Wouldn't want us to be known as, if you live in Fairfax, Arlington, don't want to get registered, you just park a car in our city and we're okay, because we're the little city. I think this is probably a good move. It's prudent. And I don't think that the people we have here would unduly exercise any enforcement authority they have been given to the degree where we would, obviously, if we hear about it, we would need to rethink it. So thank you.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is like 1 to 2+% of all the vehicles in the city. So it's a pretty low percentage. And to make it easier for people, I think many of you already know, we have the DMV to go that comes to City Hall once a month. So you can title your vehicle, you can get your license, without even leaving Falls Church City. And then we also have it 3 days a month over at the American Legion. So we understand moving is traumatic, starting a new job, getting kids in school and all that kind of stuff. And, we're sympathetic, people coming back from overseas. So we do try to make the services available to, our residents to get these things done.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Laporte, I see you have a speaker slip. Was it on this item or a different item? Okay. Okay, is there any other member of the public or any member of the public that wishes to speak to this item? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Is there any other comment or question
Counsel?
from council?
If, I just want to note one item, the ordinance as it's drafted here shall be effective immediately upon adoption. But did you say you wanted it to be effective March 1st, 2018?
That's probably
Okay.
just a typo, yeah.
And so if someone is to make a motion, they should change that to March.
To make it effective March 1st, 2018.
Okay. All right. Is there any more comment or discussion? If not, is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to grant first reading to TO 17-13 and schedule a public hearing and second reading on December 11, 2017, authorize advertisement of the same according to law with the understanding that the date of effective would be March 1st, 2018.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Council,
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Next item?
Yes, we have TO 17-16, ordinance to amend ordinance 1979 regarding the budget of expenditures and revenues appropriating funds for fiscal year 2018 for the general fund and the capital improvements program funds.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This item is to request an appropriation of $400,000 of funds taken from capital reserves that will be used for the planning work that needs to happen over the next 18 months for the campus project. The total uses is about $478,000, $78,000 coming from unexpended funds that were appropriated earlier by the city council. The items that we're requesting funding for is for engineering work for a sanitary sewer feasibility study. That's in the amount of projected cost of $30,000. Contractual services to perform surveying and land title services for the campus property in the amount of $46,000. $300,000 for commercial real estate advisory services on the development of the request for proposals for the sale or lease of the up to 10 acres of the campus, the marketing of that property, assistance in the evaluation of proposals, and negotiation of a final comprehensive agreement, and finalization of land lease or sale agreements with a conceptual development plan. And then lastly, $100,000 for legal services for the development of the request for proposal documents in the land lease or sale contracts. The schools do have architecture and engineering costs for the school program as well. Those, however, will be already appropriated in the $120 million CIP appropriation and are expected to be financed through the bond for the school itself. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I will just make one last note that with this action, then the capital reserve balance would be reduced from the current $10,278,000 or $79,000, and that will be reduced to $9,879,000 with this action. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions? Mr. Z.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, can you remind us again what the horizon would be to expend these funds? Do you expect these to last beyond the end of this fiscal year? Will some go beyond? I think you told us last time, but I think it's important for the public to understand the how long this money would be good for.
We expect that the majority of these funds will be expended in the current fiscal year, with the exception particularly of the commercial real estate advisory services, where we expect that will be expended over the next 18 months.
Okay, thank you. And with respect to some of the sentiment we're hearing to put together a project executive structure, I would ask that at the next work session that you bring us a proposal and a budget and all the little pieces that we need to be able to have a discussion on that.
We can do that. Since we'll be having a joint session with the schools on FY19 budget planning, I think this, the CIP really is probably a major thing to be discussing. My intention right now, and the way that I'm trying to address the project management piece, is to do it within our existing operating budget confines. I need to finally determine whether that's going to be feasible, but that's the approach that we're trying to take with it.
Well, I certainly understand that, and I applaud your motivation trying to keep expenses at a level that you think would be of most benefit, most cost-effective, but you've heard from many people in this community, all those that have been acquisition executives or have managed major system acquisitions, whether it be in IT or buildings or some other project, and every one of them have recommended that we establish this project executive structure. At the end, I think, of the day, it would be well worth the money. And you don't want to test your theory of living within your means, drawing from the people that you have currently on staff, and have them fail to meet the test of your first emergency. That would have an implication well beyond our ability to answer the question, why have you started mismanaging this project? I would not have an answer for that. So I ask you for, again, to bring that forward at the discussion, have the facts available so that we can discuss them. Thank you.
Before we continue, I have a disclaimer or statement I'd like to read if I could. I've consulted with the city attorney, and although no declaration is strictly required, I want to make the following statement before City Council's consideration of the proposed budget amendments in item 10B2. My wife is employed by the Falls Church City School Board, and therefore I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons that may be affected by the FY 2018 budget. However, I can participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, in the public interest. Vice Mayor Conley?
I've consulted with the city attorney, and although no declaration is strictly required, I want to make the following statement before City Council's consideration of proposed budget amendments in item 10B2 on tonight's agenda. I am an employee of the Falls Church City School Board, and therefore I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons that may be affected by the FY 2018 budget. I can participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
All right. Other questions? Ms. Oliver?
Mr. Shields, in discussing the school project, we had discussed the possibility of using capital reserves to cover some of the finance costs of the school bonds and to reduce the impact on the taxpayers. What is the impact of reducing capital reserves by $400,000?
With this appropriation, we're still within the bounds of what was modeled for the City Council in terms of the use of capital reserves when the Council considered the CIP last July. So all those multiple work sessions and public presentations where we talked about the financing plan for the CIP as a whole and the high school specifically, and envisioned that we were going to need to expend funds for these soft costs in the beginning out of capital reserves, and that was part of our financial planning.
And if I could, so this brings the capital reserves appropriations that we're using for the school to $1.3 million, which is in addition to the $120 million that the citizens approved, which would take the cost of the school nominally to $121 million. Are there any other costs to the high school which came from sources other than bonds or capital reserves?
To date, no, other than staff costs. But.
Thank you.
Other questions? I'm going to go ahead and open this up to the public. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Are there any other comments? We'll discuss some of this, Wyatt. I've got a question or two for you. We talked about trying to get caps on some of these costs. Have you had any luck in doing that? For example, like the legal fees. I think Glasgow ran an order of magnitude from what's being proposed here.
We have discussed this, and we anticipate that the legal contract is not yet finalized. The phase 2 for the commercial real estate advisory services, we have not yet given them the notice to proceed. For both of those, what we will have is monthly reporting on what the burn rate is in terms of our work on these projects. We do know that there will be times when the work is very intense, and we'll be going through big chunks of these appropriations at a certain, during months of work where it's very intense. We will then, this is a cap, and so we would need an additional appropriation in addition to this, and all of our planning in terms of time management and how we manage these contractors will be done with an 18-month horizon, particularly the commercial real estate. We've got an 18-month horizon whereby these funds need to stretch out and cover that full term. So if there are issues as we're going through that, we'll be able to raise the flag on those early and try to manage those costs.
I got to say, with all due respect, I mean, it seems to me when we're halfway through and we say, hey, I've already burned through $300,000, we're not going to change consultants or contractors halfway through the project when they tell us they've spent way more than we had hoped they'd spend. I mean, it seems to me it'd be much better to have a mechanism where they say, look, there's a cap at this number, or if you exceed this amount, the rate drops by half, or some kind of incentive to keep these numbers under control. I think just telling them, hey, because they know you can always come back as you've done before and ask for more money, and it's likely we'll have to give them that if we're halfway through a procurement. We need continued assistance. I mean, I don't see that we're going to say we're going to change consultants half the way through because they've spent twice as much as we'd hoped they'd spend. I mean, can we have a more formal mechanism to try to keep these costs in line?
Well, it might be best, this is not a contractual discussion, this is an appropriation tonight. So we can continue this discussion. One of the key elements, though, is us managing ourselves. I mean, what happens with contractors is the more meetings that we have and the more preparation we have, then that's what drives the cost. And so for a contractor for some of this work, they're going to need to have guarantees on how we're going to limit ourselves. And so that's part of the discussion. For the commercial real estate advisory services right now, there is a budget and there's an hourly rate, and that's the way it is structured right now, and so it's something we will need to manage. If we put firm caps in there, then that is, we can talk about what that means contractually and what it means in terms of level of service at different points. And I'm not prepared to have a detailed discussion of that. I understand what you're saying, and we'll continue the discussion. Before we sign this contract, we'll have that issue resolved.
Okay, I mean, I got to say, I know this discussion's about the actual amount of money to allocate or to approve, but to me, that's part and parcel with how we're going to spend it and how we're going to keep these costs under control for our taxpayers. I mean, $300,000 is nearly a penny on the tax rate, and we spent a whole lot of money, for example, on legal fees on that PPEA that I think we just need to have a very tight control over the amount of consultant money we spend. So anyway, are there other costs or other comments?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think, as Councilmember Z mentioned a minute ago, I think the governance structure is critical before we start expending more money. I think a citizen has raised that tonight, and we need to get that governance structure straightened out. One recent project that we were successful on was a Mary Ellen Henderson Middle School, so I'm wondering what that can tell us about it, but clearly a project of this sort does need a very robust project management and governance structure. Second point I'd make is I view this as an expenditure up front in order to actually drive down the $120 million, not to add to the $120 million. The whole purpose here is to have an effective economic development project that drives that cost way, way down to the extent we can possibly do it. So I view this as a necessary evil, if you will, in order for us to effectively develop that 10 acres. I voted last time when we had the tax issues, I voted to increase the taxes in order to protect the 10 million. So I'm very reluctant to approve additional expenditures now in the absence of a governance program, but I understand that's going to come forward before we actually spend the money. And this seems to me, in one form or another, to be an essential category of expenditures in order to provide for the commercial development. Thank you.
Ms. Oliver?
I just want to add that I think that it's disingenuous to take this $1.3 million out of the cost of the school. I think it should be covered by the $120 million bond and not financed separately. To the extent that council decides to go forward with taking this out of capital reserves, I ask that in the future, when you present to the public the net proceeds from the sale, that you subtract this $1.3 million from those proceeds.
Other comments, questions? If not, do we have a motion? Mr. Z?
Mayor, I move to grant first reading to TO 17-16, schedule a second reading and public hearing on December 11, 2017, and advertise the same according to law.
Do we have a second?
Second. Did we do that already?
What? You're the second? All right, let's go to the,
Question? Oh, okay.
let's go to the vote.
Okay, Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
No.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
And the motion carries 6-1. Thank you.
All right, next item.
Yes, we have TR 17-45, resolution to amend the city's comprehensive plan to 1, amend Chapter 4 to add a special revitalization district for education and economic development, 2, designate on the future land use map approximately 34.62 acres of land located at 7124 Leesburg Pike, portions of real property code numbers 51-221-001, 51-221-002, and 51-221-003, partly for parks and open space use with 2 school symbols, 24.28 acres, and partly for mixed use, 10.34 acres. 3, designate a special revitalization district for education and economic development over the entire 34.62 acres of this land. 4, designate approximately 2.4 acres of land located at 7100 Gordon Road, real property code number 52-101-012, as business on the future land use map. And 5, designate approximately 0.62 acres of land located at 1230 West Broad Street, portion of real property code number 51-219-011, as business on the future land use map.
All right, thank you. Mr. Shields?
Well, I'm going to turn it straight over to Ms. Carly Aubrey, who is our lead planner on this comp plan amendment.
Good evening, council members. Carly Aubrey of the planning staff. The intent of the requested resolution is to provide comprehensive plan text amendments and land use designations for the properties that became part of the city through the 2013 Boundary Adjustment Agreement. Based on plans and studies completed for the areas in the recently approved bond referendum, the proposed amendments would provide future land use designations for areas that are currently undesignated and also reflect the long-term future planning goals of the city. I'm going to provide a brief history of the comprehensive plan efforts for the 3 areas and then discuss specifics of the 2 non-school related parcels and then the school related parcels. The 2005 comprehensive plan describes 8 planning opportunity areas, which obviously did not include those areas brought in 2013, but they did include the majority of the Falls Plaza Shopping Center in the West End planning opportunity area, and then this portion of the property yard, the city's property yard, which is part of the Gordon Road Triangle planning opportunity area. The 2013 Boundary Adjustment Agreement brought in this area, this triangle piece, and then the school's parcels. Since 2011, small area plans have been adopted for 5 of the planning opportunity areas. And in 2016, Chapter 4 of the Comprehensive Plan was amended to do 3 things: recognize the small area plans that have been adopted or are planned, and this area now has been identified as the schools-related parcels planning opportunity area. This, and last year, it also designated revitalization areas, which encompasses the city's main commercial areas and generally align with the POAs. And all 4 of these areas are within the West End revitalization area. And then these amendments also designated the entire city as an urban development area. The proposed land use designations for the city property yard and the Falls Plaza Shopping Center are business, and this is consistent with a larger parcel and adjacent parcels. In regards to the schools-related parcel, they have been identified as the schools-related parcels POA, and a draft small area plan is underway. And as I mentioned, they're part of the West Broad Street revitalization area. Proposed text amendments to Chapter 4 of the comp plan would create a special revitalization district for education and economic development that would establish goals and strategies that are desirable for this area. And it would be indicated on the map by the red solid line. The goals and strategies are listed on pages 8 through 11 of the staff report. Since the work session last week, the following changes have been made to these goals. The language on the first strategy listed on page 10 has been amended to read, standards should provide for building heights and massing compatible to the adjacent schools while allowing for higher building heights adjacent to arterials and nearby commercial development. Also, a potential range of floor area ratios and square footages for development has been provided. The language for the second strategy on page 10 has been amended to expand on the potential financing mechanisms that should be considered for the site. The goal regarding environmentally responsible development has been revised to include integration for educational opportunities, and a strategy has been added regarding green building and site design for the school buildings and facilities. And a goal has been added to encourage collaboration between commercial uses and educational programs located on the site and adjacent uses, specifically Falls Church Public Schools, Virginia Tech, and University of Virginia. Additionally, this area would be shown on the future land use map as special revitalization district for education and economic development, and would have designations of parks and open space with 2 school symbols for approximately 24 acres, and mixed use for approximately 10 acres. This would provide suitable land use designations for a new high school and expanded middle school, and signal the city's intention to facilitate and support significant mixed-use development on the commercial portion of the site. Anticipated steps for this process is a Planning Commission recommendation hearing on December 18th, anticipated school board comments in December or January, and then anticipated city council adoption on January 22nd, 2018. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Ms. Oliver.
When we pass this sort of changes to the city's comprehensive plan, what is the normal time frame that you would expect a plan to last?
The effort to take for...
When we approve a plan like this, we're not thinking it's only good for 3 months. You know,
No,
are we thinking it's good for 300 years? What's the typical time frame?
Typical is 20 to 40 years is a typical time frame. This would be probably coincide with the boundary adjustment agreement, which was 50 years. So after that time, and that agreement is up, so to speak, then we may revisit it.
So the boundary adjustment agreement is 50 years before we could change the mix of use on the lands. And so in passing this, we would expect that to stand for the 50 years.
We would expect that. I mean, we could always change it before that, but to be consistent with that agreement, that would make sense to keep it at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hardy.
Thank you. Thank you for the updates. I think the compatible height language in the FAR is helpful. I think I also was the one during work session that asked to see the Fairfax County future land use, so I think it would be helpful to get it up there just to have it for public record. A clarifying question. I see that adjacent to the corner Broad and Haycock that's in Fairfax County that includes the UVA and tech buildings is designated as mixed uses by Fairfax. Is their definition of mixed uses similar to our definition of mixed uses?
I would have to look it up.
Do we know?
I don't know off the top of my head now.
I just think that when we think about our neighbors, it's important to think about compatibility with things, just because they're not in our boundaries, to think about compatibility and anticipating any concerns from neighbors down the road that, hey, you're already designated as mixed use. This is not a big deal to designate this corner also as mixed use. Thanks.
Mr. Z.
Thank you, Mayor. I also applaud the inclusion of the Fairfax County zoning map as part of this presentation. And I can see there's been a lot of work here in tightening up the language since we first saw it. And in particular, I think between lines 301 and 302, you have a variety of strategy statements to result in a goal. And I'm looking forward to buttressing that, fortifying that with additional language, as I'm sure will come out during the course of these discussions. Last time I thought there was some notion of putting in as a goal for a special taxation district and other attributes that would be associated with the business improvement district, and I don't see that here. I assume that either overlooking this or maybe it's still being drafted and will be worked back in.
That was attempted to be addressed if you look the second strategy on page 10. Consider creating a tax increment financing district, business improvement district, community development authority, or similar mechanisms to generate tax revenue from commercial development, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, right. Well, perhaps there could be some additional discussion on how to fortify that. What is the process for getting additional comments and intake from stakeholders and others?
Like any project, we would take them at
Pro-
public hearings or email, letters, calls.
Okay. Well, I'm just mindful of what the process might be. You know, none of us want to be obstructionists for, you know, trying to achieve the perfect document. But it does have to be sufficiently robust, and I'm thinking about our communications people here, in particular Mr. Duncan and Ms. Connolly, that are always very mindful of getting the comments, especially something that's as important with goal statements and strategies on how to get to those things. So, you know, it starts to work this from land use, obviously, into something that is more concrete. I understand we're moving from comprehensive plan to land use, eventually zoning and others. So I'll leave that to Frida to perhaps think about a little bit more. I would also like the city, whether it's the city manager or some other body here, to do some outreach to Fairfax, try to, and in particular, try to get a meeting of the interjurisdictional committee that's would include John Faust, but is headed by our good friend Penny Gross. I'm thinking maybe after the first year we could have a little meeting where she would share this. I think she would be delighted to bring all these people together for our work to our good. So thank you.
We've had, Mr. Z, we've had those discussions, and that is in process. It's just unfortunately been taking longer than we hoped it had, but we've had discussions with folks in Fairfax about that. Duncan.
Just a few little wording questions, I guess. The Florida area ratio numbers that are mentioned in, I think, 4 different instances, either in the staff report or the language at the end. See, they're roughly consistent, but not entirely. I mean, there's reference to 2.5, 3.0, 3.5, 4.0. If there's a reason that they're different, that's fine, but maybe just if it's possible to say it the same way, say it the same way all throughout if that's appropriate. You know, no less than would be okay with me. Right now, it's generally referred to as, you know, it can be greater than X if we're seeking to achieve more density up there. Anyway, I'll leave that up to you. There's language at the end about a school symbol in another instance on line 439. In other instances, it seems important that you say 2 school symbols. So if that's appropriate, just make sure that we, in the language of the ordinance there, use 2 school symbols. There was a reference on line 289 to commercial development in order to achieve the desired level of commercial development. As far as I can tell, appropriately through the rest of the document, you stick with using the phrase economic development. I would suggest that that's the better phrase to use, just so we allow the market to dictate what sort of, you know, development we get. It's not likely to be all commercial. I think we all understand that. That was the only time I saw the word commercial pop up there, but if I missed it somewhere else, I'm always in favor of saying economic development as opposed to commercial development. Not that I'm opposed to commercial development, of course, but, and 2 other things. Line 58, I think there is word or words may be missing when you get to the second reading. Make sure the staff report fills in whatever words are there. And finally, on line 88, and this may just be me quibbling, but, you know, I think this process, once we finish it 7, 8 years from now, will be a very interesting case study about how a municipality tackles a really challenging opportunity and does it well, I hope. As we look back on how we got where we are now, the unsolicited offer process is characterized as the 2 bids are rejected and the process is abandoned because it did not provide the result sought by the community. I mean, I guess in some general sense that's true, but at least for my money, I'm not sure that the bids were, I'm not sure they were actually rejected. I guess they were. But they were not rejected because they inherently were bad bids. Maybe there weren't enough bids. Or the main objection, and I think the record should show this, is that the process was simply not open and transparent enough. And that's why, fundamentally, or at least importantly, why it was abandoned. So maybe some reference to that as you memorialize the history of the process could be indicated. I think that's all. When we get the updated voting percentages, just make sure that we use those on line 134 through 39 of the staff report. Thank you.
Ms. Hardy?
Thanks. I had one more thought or question. It was actually prompted by Ms. Oliver's question about the time horizon for changes to the comp plan and future land use. So if we think about this as kind of being a long-term vision for what we envision the west side of the city to be, kind of in that 50-year horizon, have we given thought to actually expanding that revitalization district beyond this kind of new 30 to 40, I guess, acres we have there to include the other two corners that belong in the city? Or are there downsides to actually expanding it and calling the rest of those corners part of the revitalization district?
Sounds like he's thought about it.
Very good question. As Ms. Aubrey mentioned, the city has already designated the whole West Broad Street area, including this area, as a revitalization area, as it is called for in the state response to the state's proffer legislation. We will be looking, I think, at those other areas, but at this point, we're trying to come up with a plan that specifically is consistent for the area that we got back from Fairfax County, where we have the boundary adjustment agreement on what the land uses will be. And so there could be other designations for those areas that are presently business, but at this point, we're focusing new designations on the school site and making the other areas consistent with their present designation. That doesn't mean we wouldn't revisit those areas and look at them as a totality. What might happen in the future in the Gordon Road Triangle, what might happen in the future for the West the Plaza shopping center.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're going to be holistic in our thinking and invite those landowners to the table too.
Yes, and I think there would be interest in possibly looking at other things. Certainly the time frame with the agreement with Fairfax County is what Ms. Aubrey was mentioning. That's, we've got an agreement that's memorialized. The other areas, certainly everything west of the W&OD Trail, is part of what we hope will be influenced in a positive way by economic development on the 10 acres as a part of the school project.
Okay, are there other comments? I want to take public comment in just a moment if there is any. Vice Mayor Connolly?
Ms. Aubrey, thanks. I appreciate some of the changes that you've made, especially back here on pages 9 and 10. And I appreciate that this is going to be sent out to the Planning Commission and School Board, just because I think it's really important as we set up these foundational documents that the school board and the city council are on the same page going forward. So I would hope that the school board would take this seriously and take a good look at this and make sure that it's reflecting the goals that they have for this project as well. There's a couple, I'm only inspired by Mr. Duncan as I just read this over. There's a couple dates on that timeline that need to be fixed. So on line 81, 85, and 92, they all happened in 2015. And I think the rest are okay. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Snyder?
Thanks a lot. So in designating this as mixed use, what are we signaling to developers? Are we signaling that kind of mixed use we've seen so far is acceptable to us? I mean, tell me more about what we're signaling when we use that term here. Are we, do we have a later opportunity to push toward more commercial? I mean, what are we really saying by using the term mixed use in this context?
Our current mixed-use designation is defined as commercial, residential, office, hotel. I think once we get into more specifics, that will be during the zoning once we start talking about the rezoning phase of this. I think that's probably where more of the specifics will come into.
Right, so with this, we're not signaling, for example, that 80% residential would be fine with us.
No, I mean, the most specifics we have is talking about floor area ratios and square footage, but as far as percentage of uses, we haven't defined that in our goals and strategies.
What are we saying about residential versus commercial with respect to the floor area ratios? Are we saying anything about that here?
No.
No. So, the use of the term mixed use doesn't imply a particular mix. It could be 90% commercial and 10% residential, for example, or some other mix. It could be hotel. It could be, is entertainment permitted in this under mixed use?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, it would be very important for me not to signal a particular mix, particularly of the 80 or 90% residential that we've seen so far. And what I'm hearing you say is we're not signaling that with this action tonight.
No, this is meant to be, as comp plans are, more general, kind of a general strategy, goals and strategies. And then once we start doing the rezoning and the small area plan, that's when those finer details could be looked at.
Right. Okay, thank you.
In addition as well, the RFP, we're going to issue an RFP and we can put parameters, like the school's putting parameters around the project. Let me go ahead and open this up to the public. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this item? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Are there additional comments from council? Questions? Okay, why don't we go then to a motion?
I move to refer TR 17-45 to the Planning Commission and School Board and schedule a public hearing and final action for January 22nd, 2018, and advertise the same according to law.
Have a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes?
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next item.
We have TR 17-46, resolution granting December 26, 2017 as an additional holiday for city employees.
Mayor, members of council, this is a request that I brought forward. It is an issue that was brought to my attention by the Employee Advisory Council. With the Christmas holiday occurring on December 25th, which is a Monday, it was noted that the state and a good number of other local jurisdictions have established the Tuesday, December 26th, as a holiday as well, to assist with travel and other holiday activities for employees. And so this request is brought to the City Council and for your consideration.
All right. Any questions for anyone? Okay, Mr. Laporta, did you want to say anything?
This is mine, yes.
All right.
Good evening, Council. I'm Gary Laporta. I'm here tonight as the chairman of the city's Economic Advisory Council. The Employee Advisory, not economic, Employee Advisory Council. The Employee Advisory Council is elected by city employees other than department heads, whose purpose is to discuss activities, policies, and programs of interest to city employees and to act as an advisory capacity to city management. At our November 7th meeting, we requested that the city manager consider including Tuesday, December 26th as an additional holiday for all employees. This request aligns with the state employee holiday calendar and with some of our neighboring jurisdictions. Having this additional day will allow our employees to enjoy the entire Christmas day with friends and/or family and to travel more safely on a day when roads and flights are less crowded. We ask your adoption of TR 1746. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Are there any questions or comments? Ms. Oliver.
Just one question. Other jurisdictions which have given this as a holiday, did they also give their employees all the other holidays that we did?
I believe so.
All right. Anything else? Mr. Z.
Well, I just don't think any one of us here would be so, what's the right word? Scroogey.
Grinchy? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the word. Scroogey. So if you're ready, I'm ready to move to adopt this. Move to adopt TR 17-46.
Second.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, council.
All right, thank you. Enjoy the holiday. Let's move on to our consent items. Does anyone want to take any item off consent? I don't know, I'm streaming.
Mayor, I move to move the items on the consent calendar, including at line 1, TR 17-37, and the appointments of Jerome Barrett to the Falls Church Cable Access Corporation Board, also reappointing Jerome Barrett to the City Employee Review Board, and Board of Equalization request that we make the recommendation the city attorney submit a recipient order to the Arlington County Board Circuit Court requesting appointment of Robert Lajeunesse to the city's Board of Equalization to fill the 3-year term of February 1, 2018 to January 31st, 2021.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, City Attorney, do we do this by voice vote or by roll call? What would you recommend?
You can do it by voice vote
All
if
right,
you like.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the ayes have it. And let's move on to other business. Campus planning update. Mr. Shields, Mr. Noonan?
Well, thank you. I'd like to invite my colleague, our superintendent, Peter Noonan, forward. And the council's been provided at the dais a hard copy, and this is partly for Dr. Noonan's awareness of page 1 through 12, which is the sort of the initial part of the RFQ, and then page the attachment E, the scope of work, which is the 8 pages of the scope of work. Those are the 2 items that are provided in hard copy at the dais. The full version of the RFQ is posted now on Granicus and has been provided to the City Council digitally. I would just note that I was invited to attend a school board meeting a week ago in closed session where this was discussed between the school attorney and the school management team and the school board, and I appreciate being invited to that discussion. The intent of this RFQ, I'll let Dr. Noonan speak through the specifics of it, but this, of course, is the first step for the school's procurement process, and it really is about gathering in the qualified firms that ultimately then would be able to participate in the RFP, which is the really substantive part of the procurement. But it should be noted that there is a lot of substance in this RFQ to signal to these prospective bidders for this project what the city's expectations are. So we look forward to the briefing tonight and questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Tarter, members of the council, City Manager Shields, and members of the public that are here. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for that introduction. This is my maiden voyage in front of the council, I believe, in official capacity, and I'm confident that you will be kind to me as we go through the evening. This tonight really is a briefing, more than anything. You do have at your leisure to peruse the RFP electronically, and you do have some parts of it that I think are important. My hope this evening, though, is to provide you with information in 3 parts, if that's possible. The first part is, where are we now, and how did we get there? The second part are some highlights or some high-level ideas that are part of the RFP. And the third step is, what are we doing next? What are the next steps in the process? So with that, sort of as a working sort of structure, I ask that we start with part one. And I don't have anything prepared tonight to put up on the screen. So it really was meant to be more than anything just a briefing. So where are we now and how do we get there? First and foremost, I want to extend my personal thanks to the council for your support of the bond referendum and your engagement through the process and into today and into the future. I think as all of you are well aware, and as I am learning, as our resident historian, Mary Beth Connolly, has been very helpful in getting us through, we understand that this process started nearly a decade ago, where there was a conversation that began about how to construct a new high school for a lot of reasons. Throughout the last decade, there has been a significant amount of input from a variety of people. There have been vision sessions, there have been revision sessions, there have been extended sessions beyond that, again, to continue looking at what could the school look like now and into the future. There were education specifications that were adopted by the school board a couple of years ago that were based on conversations with the staff, based on some looks around our surrounding jurisdictions and nationally, culminating in what I believe really was helpful in getting the work moving forward, which was the feasibility study that was recently done that you all have been part of and part of those conversations as well. Which gets us to today, which is a look at the RFP process and moving out through the RFP. And I want to take just a second, not for your benefit, but for the public's benefit, just to make sure that we're clear about the vernacular and the language associated with this RFP. As you all are aware, we've engaged in a PPEA process, the Public-Private Education Act process. And in that process, there is the RFP phase. And in typical non-PPEA processes, there's a phase called the Request for Qualifications or the Request for Information, RFQ or RFI, and then there's the actual RFP process that goes out. In the PPEA process, which we are going to be following, everything's sort of called the RFP process, so it's lumped together. So this evening, what I really would like to share with you is the RFP process, but it's the qualifications phase of the RFP process as opposed to the design phase, which is the secondary process as part of the RFP. And part of the reason that I want to be really clear about that is that I think that when you hear RFP, there's an expectation setting or an awareness that rises that in this qualifications piece may be founded, but maybe not as founded as perhaps when we get to the RFP phase in the design itself, because that I think is going to be the most important. So as we have, or as I have previously promised, along with the school board, I am committed to sharing with the City Council through this whole process information as we go along, and tonight what I'd like to do is to talk a little bit about that RFP qualifications phase. So part two is the RFP itself. And I want to preface what you received today is a working draft that's really close to final. We have a few little dots of I's, crosses of T's that we're working on. But that work product that you have been provided is a real culmination of a ton of input that came from the school board, it came from teachers, it came from the council, it came from staff, it came from the community throughout the last decade. That has been gathered and resulted in what you received today, which is that RFP qualifications phase. There's nothing in that RFP, I don't believe, that would surprise anyone. I think it's been a clear process so far that we intend to maintain, and we continue to be postured in one that is predicated on honesty and ethical behavior as we continue our discussions with you and with the community around the RFP itself. There are a couple of highlights that I want to bring to your attention that I think a lot of people are interested in that are part of this RFP qualification phase, where there is a substantive amount of detail that's in there, and part of that detail is, again, as Mr. Shields indicated, an opportunity to indicate to design and build contractors what we're looking for. But there are a number of highlights in there that are a result of the education specs that were adopted by the school board a couple of years ago. So as you look at class size, what you'll see is classroom spaces, typical classroom spaces that result in about 800 square feet, which ultimately meet the needs of our students better than what we currently have in our existing building. You will see a very strong theater and arts program that is in there, which includes band and choir and orchestra and music. We have extremely strong sports facilities that also include a competition-sized gym, an auxiliary gym that would also include an opportunity to host other games as well. So those are some of the instructional and educational highlights, not to mention all of the other things that go into a full-scale, effective educational program. But some of the other pieces that I think are of interest that are included in the RFP are some of the work around the green initiatives that we're looking at. So for example, including in the RFP the geothermal heating and cooling system. Looking at how we can get to LEED Gold. Currently the standard in the City of Falls Church, as I understand it, has been LEED Silver. We would like to take that a step forward and create a LEED Gold building. And ultimately have what we would consider a net zero ready building so that when the time comes that we have the resources necessary to be able to change over from a traditional system to a fully net zero product, we would have the opportunity to do that, which would include things like solar panels and the like. The current RFP as it's drafted is designed to accommodate up to 1,500 students. With a premium, you'll see in the document as you go through it, that will be given to a design build team that will also create opportunities for future expansion if needed. In addition to the ed specifications, in addition to the requirements of the contractors and builders and architects that we're looking at, there's also a document called the level of quality. And in that document, it specifies most specifically what are the levels of quality around finishes that we're looking at. We are not planning to build the Taj Mahal. It's not a Cadillac, but it's not a Pinto either. We believe that we need to have something of quality, so think Toyota Camry or Avalon, right? Something in that range that is a high quality building that meets the needs for us now and into the future. So some of the things in the level of quality, just to give you a sense of what you might see if you're looking in there, are tile finishes, and those would be the floor finishes. So for example, in all of the common areas, what we're calling for in the level of quality is terrazzo tile. Terrazzo tile is a poured concrete, beautiful looking tile, but in the areas that are less public, looking at more of a vinyl type tile. So those also have a long lifespan, but certainly not as long as perhaps the terrazzo. So it's a combination of finishes that really allow us to get there. So you've got the ed spec, you've got the finishes, you've got some qualifications, documentation in that RFQ or RFP, and then you also have some information about what the expectations are in terms of things like the greening pieces of our buildings. So that's sort of a very, very high level look at what's in the RFP in the qualification stage. So that sort of leads me to part 3, which is our next step. So what do we do from here? We have a significant number of milestones that have been created that we'd like to be able to stick to as best we can. So we are looking at tomorrow night, the school board will take another pass at this RFP and make some comments as necessary. We'll make those appropriate modifications, and we would like to launch this RFP as early as November 30th, but we're currently working with the procurement office on the general government side to make sure that it's all together and ready as well. We anticipate that in February of 2018, we will have taken all of the folks that have come forward and submitted the RFP, and then what we'll do is we will cut that field to 3. So we will reduce, say we have 15 people that are interested in designing and building our new high school. We will go through a process that will be based on a rubric and scoring that will reduce that to 3. And in February of 18, we would take those 3 and we would ask those 3 design build firms to then provide for us a detailed proposal of what they would be working on. That would then include some design. This RFP qualifications piece does not include any design. It's just simply, can you do the job? Do you have the qualifications to do it? What is your history of other jobs? Have you been on time? Have you been under budget? Have you built a high school? But in February, we would then down select to those three. And then we would look forward to June of 2018 when we would go through again a full vetting process, a competition through the RFP design phase, and down select to the finalist, which then would provide us an opportunity to continue engaging in that final design. And then in May of 18, we would get to the final design and the plans and the costs in May of 19, and then June of 19, we're looking at issuing the construction bonds to begin building the high school with the summer of 2021, the high school opening. So those are some of the high-level big milestones that we're looking at. Additionally, we are looking at a multitude of opportunities for the community to provide input and outreach, and we're outreaching to them with respect to this process. And our first opportunity to do that actually is this Wednesday. I'll be meeting with the staff at George Mason High School to talk to them about the RFP process and how it works. Also to share back with them the ed specifications that they visioned around in 2015 to show them how those were woven into this RFP process. On December 13th at 7:30 p.m. in the Mustang Cafe, we anticipate hosting an evening where we will share with the community this RFP qualifications phase piece, where folks in the community will have an opportunity to hear from the school staff and some general government staff, actually. We're going to invite as well to help us to be able to share out what is in the RFQ, and then not to revision what the process would look like. I think we've done a really nice job over the last decade, or you all have done a really nice job over the last decade getting really clear about the vision, but to identify perhaps what's blaringly missing, what's obviously missing from this RFQ, so that when we get to the final design phase of the RFP, we can incorporate those comments into that final RFP. So when we down select to the three, we can give them the updated version. And then we are looking at many opportunities between now and when that final design is done over the next year and a half for the community to engage. There'll be a series of opportunities that will not only be provided by the school staff and by general government staff, but also by architects, design firms, and the like to engage rather significantly in this process. And then the last thing I want to say, just for members of the public who may be watching, is one of the things we are working very hard on the school side also is memorializing everything that we're doing into a singular website, so that if anyone wanted to log in to see on our website what has happened, what are the steps, we have a countdown clock. We're looking at how we're going to monitor the funds as well publicly, so people can come in and see a dashboard look to see how the money's being spent and the like. You'll be able to do that. And so we're working up our website to make sure that that's all set up as well. So we're frankly very excited about this project and about this process going forward. We think this is a real celebration for the City of Falls Church and look forward to doing this work. So again, what you have in front of you is the very first step in this journey that is going to be 4 years long. And that first journey is who's out there, who's available, who would we like to have do this work, and what qualifications do they have. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I certainly welcome any comments or questions that you may have.
All right, thank you so much. Welcome. Thank you for coming out. We appreciate your staying with us. Mr. Z has the first question. Mr. Z?
Thank you. November 30 is this Thursday.
Yes, sir.
What is your projection of issuing the document on that day?
We're working, it's a good question, Mr. Z. We're working very closely with Jim Wise in the procurement office. We're hoping that the school board will move ahead after seeing it a week and a half ago for the first time with adoption of the RFP tomorrow, and then working it through Mr. Wise's shop. We're hoping for the 30th, but it may be a little bit later than that, and we're okay with that, just to make sure we get it right.
So would it be Friday or the following Thursday, or? I mean, we've put out here, with all due respect here to the entire world, that November 30th. I'd really hate to miss the first deadline by saying, you know, we couldn't get our act together.
Well, I would suggest that we have our act together. We just want to make sure that we have this first step out of the gate right. And we are anticipating a November 30th launch.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Let's start at the end, Ms. Hardy, and work to Mr. Snyder.
Great. Thanks for joining us tonight, Dr. Noonan. So just one quick comment and then some questions, because I'll be honest that given that we just got this at 5 o'clock before our meeting tonight, I haven't had a chance to actually review the document in detail. I guess on that note, though, given that we're 20 days after the election and the referendum passed, in the spirit of kind of transparency, I'd love to get these documents a little further in advance, especially if we are actually trying to have a discussion about it. I just think it's good for the public and good for us to be able to engage when we've actually had time to pre-read. But on that note, in the glance that I did, I saw the 108 number in there. Is 108 million all in, or is that not including certain things?
There are certain things that are excluded from that 108, and what I'd like to share with you is there's a contingency amount in there of roughly 3.3 million, about $4 million for FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, $2 million in construction management fees, and about $2.7 million in bond costs, which gets us right up to the $120 million. There is frankly, that 108 number that's out there, and we have a lot of asks in that RFP, in that qualifications phase to see who can do it for that number. My anticipation is that there will be some market competition to bring that number down, and that was the idea behind outlining that number.
Yeah. I think you'll hear from all of us that we'd love to see that number go further down if possible, so we appreciate the work there. The second kind of general question I had is, I see that we're starting the PPA process again, and I know that in the last PPA process, one of the concerns we had with it, besides the fact that it was coupled with the economic development, was the fact that a large part of the responses couldn't be made available to the public, and that just didn't sit well with us, again, in that spirit of transparency. How will this one be different?
This one's different. We actually have spent a significant amount of time, and you can read in the RFP itself that the documents will be made public within 10 days of receiving them. So information will be up on the website, and again, it will be housed in that section of the school website so people can log in and see. There may be portions of those responses that may be redacted if they are proprietary. But there will be a significant vetting process that the contractors will need to go through to get portions of it redacted for proprietary reasons, and there's a pretty high standard for that.
And one question that I frequently get is, how is PPA better than, say, design bid build, or construction manager at risk, which is the approach we're using for City Hall right now? If we have a response ready for that, we don't need to talk about it tonight, but that's something that we frequently hear, especially when people recollect what the PPA process was 18 months ago.
Yeah.
My third general question is, when we look at the school program in here, how does it compare to the results of the feasibility study done with Perkins Eastman? So specifically, they had done some awesome work in terms of benchmarking our specs against neighboring jurisdictions, telling us where we had opportunities to decrease costs. And some ones that I think came to memory were the size of our Ox Gym, the size of the athletics facilities, in particular, were particularly high compared to neighboring jurisdictions, and they identified those as cost-saving opportunities. Have we taken those recommendations to heart in this version of the school program, or are these the same as the school program from before?
That's a great question, Ms. Hardy. We've taken into account the reductions that were suggested as part of that process in this RFP. So you will see, for example, reductions not only in the Ox Gym, but in the PE program itself. Also in the auditorium. Originally, in the original ed specs that were adopted about 2 years ago, there was seating for 750, I believe. Now we're looking at between 650 and 700. We looked at some other classroom spaces that could be reduced, a couple that were eliminated, so we've taken into account those reductions.
And then finally, just a general comment. So I know that you've kind of talked about the design phase being more important and where we'll have opportunity for more kind of public comment and community engagement. But I think the qualifications phase, in my mind, is equally important because we're filtering the universe of people who have the expertise in doing a lot of these things. So I'm glad that we've gotten some of those green things in there. But to the extent that we can still gather more input, I think it is important to make sure that this qualifications phase gets as much eyes on it too, and not just focus it on the design phase.
Thank you.
Mr. Snyder?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Superintendent, and thanks to the school board for a lot of good work here. So a couple things. Kind of in my view, the school community is predominantly responsible for the design of the school itself, but we do need a cooperative relationship between the city council and the school board, so we appreciate that you brought this to us, although at the 11th hour. So here are really three specific requests or questions. In the qualifications and experience, which I view as the absolute core of what we're asking for at this stage, and I think you said it very well when you talked about wanting a contractor or contractors or responders to this to show that they've been able to produce on time and under budget. I don't see the under budget anywhere in the language here, and I would urge you to tighten that up. You sort of get around it, but it would be interesting to treat the 108 not as the floor, but rather as a ceiling, and preferably the ceiling in reality is actually less. So I think my suggestion would be that you tighten up the language a little bit about the on time and under budget. The second thing that I'm suggesting that you take a look at is this whole issue of the commercial side. I think that it's mentioned in the documents, but you may want to indicate experience with similar projects. You may want to define that to include close coordination and cooperation with adjoining commercial development, and I didn't see that in here specifically laid out. Perhaps it's intended, but I would certainly think that you would want that sort of experience specifically laid out in response to the qualifications and experience. And finally, on the environmental issues, I agree with those who think we should drive toward a net zero. I don't know whether this language actually does it or not, but it's clear that you've made an effort to get there, and I'll rely on other council members for a discussion on that as to whether in our view, you've tightened that up to the extent that you possibly could. And here's a question. Why did you decide on 3 as opposed to 4? You know, if you got a whole lot of competition, why 3? Why did you pick that particular number?
So a really good question. I think what I've been able to do is talk to industry experts that are out there with respect to this over the course of the last couple of months, and part of the rationale that really sort of resonated with me around 3 versus more is the cost that is incurred by any of these architect, design, and build firms to take on this RFP process, to be able to go out and to do the design work, taking up to 6 months or a year, can cost these firms upwards of $500,000. And the risk when there are more people in the pool will oftentimes drive competition away. So by limiting it to 3, knowing that you have a 33% chance of getting it versus a 25% chance, according to those that I've had a chance to talk to, really have indicated that that ups the premium for them, and they're more interested in participating.
Yeah, I don't have a firm opinion. I will say that in our prior effort on this, when we ended up with 2, that was deemed to be a generally unsatisfactory. You're one more than that. I just don't know. But I was curious about why you were limiting it to 3. And then finally, Virginia's version of PPEA has minimal sort of public protections in it compared to other ways you could draft the statute. So if you go that way, we also have some experience that the community was generally dissatisfied with the amount of public engagement and the degree of details that were available to the public. So I'm just providing that to you for your use. These are all recommendations and suggestions, and so that's what I had based upon the time that we had to review the contract. Also, it really ties back to the governance issue, and you may want to involve one or more council members and certainly our staff in reviewing and making some final decisions with regard to this, just as I would assume that there will be school community involved with us on the commercial development side, although the predominant decision-making authority may lie with us, and obviously we all work for the public. But in engaging one or more representatives of council in the decision-making process, which again is ultimately a school board decision, might prove to be something that would be valuable. And we should, of course, reciprocate with regard to things that are predominantly under our jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that the structure that Mr. Shields provided the other day as a potential solution to our project certainly would incorporate council members as well as school board members, because we value that as well. With respect to the timing of this, I'll take the hit on that. I apologize for getting it to you so late. I will say that it's gone through some pretty significant churning in terms of getting it to a point where I felt like I was comfortable letting it out. We had originally planned to do this privately in closed session for a number of reasons, for strategic purposes. And when we decided to make that shift, it slowed us down a little bit. So, my marching orders, if you will, or not my marching orders, but the understanding that I had, right, wrong, or indifferent, was that you all wanted to see it before it went out, and I wasn't aware that there was more than that, and so I apologize if you didn't have enough time with it.
No, and we appreciate the briefing tonight and the opportunity to discuss this with you and understand, at least from my standpoint, on making suggestions for your consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Conley?
As the designated historian on some of these things, I just want to point out that the PPEA process, we've done a lot of them in Falls Church schools over the years. And the most recent one that was a joint PPEA for this commercial project was indeed difficult, and there were a lot of closed sessions because it was so complicated. But we've also done very successful PPEAs using the part that is discussed in closed meetings with no problem at all. And that was, Mary Ellen Henderson was the first PPEA project in the state of Virginia. Jesse Thackeray was a PPEA, and the TJ project was as well. I think that's all. Although maybe the Mount Daniel edition 10 years ago was too. So I think we do have a history of having good PPEAs, and then we had a challenging one in the last 2 years. So I'm looking forward as we go ahead on this to be able to go back to our successful PPEA process.
And our intention, thank you, Ms. Conley, for bringing that up, and our intention is to leverage the openness of the PPA process as opposed to fall back on the closed portion of it.
Other comments? We will open to the public shortly. I've got a few comments, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. I appreciate you acknowledging this came late. I would say that sort of tempers what I would comment on it, because I frankly haven't had not an opportunity to read it, and I was reading some of this while you were talking, to be honest with you. So I would just say in the future, in the spirit of cooperation, it'd be great if we could maybe share the documents in enough time to really chance, because I think each side has some great insights and different perspective that I think is very valuable. And I think, frankly, also the public deserves to have this open back and forth so that they can participate and join in and speak to the matter as well. But I'll leave that for now, but I would just maybe encourage that going forward. I was speaking when you mentioned the environmental side. I have two documents that we were given. One is an RFP. Maybe it's dated. I don't know if this is older. Is this what you're currently working on? I have two documents. Are they both what you're working on currently? Yeah. So this one shows lead silver. Is that not right, or am I missing something? The second document we're given on paragraph C on page 2 says at a minimum lead silver. Is that?
Let us go back and fix that. It should be gold. At minimum, it's lead gold.
Okay, so this document has got some revisions, but this is the latest and greatest?
I'm not sure what you're looking at and referencing. Oh, from attachment D. E, sorry. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I believe that it is, but I'll go back and check just to make sure.
So, okay.
But
so
that should be gold, not silver.
Gold, and then, are we talking about net zero ready, though? Is that?
That's correct.
So it would not just say gold, it would say gold/net zero ready, something like that?
It actually says, yeah. Subparagraph E, it says, provide a net zero ready George Mason High School building. Preference will be given
Okay.
to proposals that provide energy generation towards a net zero energy building. Again,
Okay,
if
so
you had
then
more,
C-
you had more time. I
C
think.
probably would get deleted then, since that's talking about silver.
C will be changed to gold.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so C would be changed to gold instead of silver. So it'll be LEED gold certification. And that provide and add alternate language would come out, because we're not adding an alternate to gold.
Like I said, it's hard because I was looking at it
Understood.
while I was here. I do have a couple comments, presuming this is the latest and greatest. So the multi-use field is discussed on 5 of 8. And this may have been shared with you, but some developers, at least that I've spoken to, have some concern about having a practice field at the end, that thing that draws them into their commercial development being a practice field. And I think there's particularly some concern with the traditional practice field. This says provide an alternative for field lighting, scoreboard, aluminum bleachers. Is that the intention, to have basically stands and everything at the end of the commercial entrance in front of the school?
Well, Mayor Tarter, thank you. That's a good question. We are currently operating off of the feasibility piece that Perkins Eastman had given to us. And when they looked at the test fit, that is indeed where that field would fit. The intention of that space would be to purpose for multiple uses. It would not only be for field hockey and soccer as indicated in here, but it could be used for community use. It could be used for a variety of different things. We put in the add alternate for lighting, scoreboard, and aluminum bleachers so that if we were to use it as a soccer field or were to use it as a field hockey field, we would have the capacity to be able to do that. We're also looking at, and I think that there are a multitude of solutions, and tonight's not the night to go through the solutions or the options or opportunities, but I think there are some opportunities that we could begin to look at as we get into the design phase that could mitigate some of those issues that you've raised, whether it's structured parking with a field on top or some sort of architectural design that capped that space. Or we would want to work with not only our architect but their commercial side as well, and then alongside Mr. Shields and his team to see how best to make that work.
I have to say, again, with some discussion with some developers, this concept, I think, causes pause for some folks who are trying to draw people in to the commercial development. And so I guess I would just suggest possibly adding some language that it needs to be compatible with commercial development, or something that this just sounds like your typical ball field, and I'm not sure that's the right place. And I'm not trying to solve this problem, but I guess just make sure whoever you hire is cognizant that it needs sensitive treatment, and that it may need something above and beyond, or maybe different than what's suggested here, which seems like a more traditional field, which may be not appropriate next to what we hope to be very high quality and attractive development and possibly multi-use areas. Okay, let me see what else I've got here. You mentioned earlier that you had used some of the Perkins Eastman, the baseline they've done off other schools, things like that. It didn't seem like that reduced your cost, though, any, at least unless I'm mistaken. Did your costs come down when you actually did some baseline analysis? You dropped the auditorium from, let's say, $750 to $650. Did that come up with any cost savings or projected cost savings? It did. Seem. So your total number is still $120, though. How is it that it's come down?
We currently have a healthy FF&E cost in there. We may or may not hit all of that furniture, fixtures, and equipment money. We also built in a contingency which wasn't in the original. So there are a couple of places that we think we can bring our costs down.
So you think the FF&E is high or possibly high?
Potentially high, yeah.
Okay. And what's your contingency?
About $2 million.
And that doesn't seem very high, though, for a $120 $20 million project.
I think the beauty of the GMP allows us to bring our contingency down to a different level.
Okay. All right, I guess that's all I've got right now. We do have one public speaker. Does anyone else have any comments before I move to public? Mr. Z?
Thank you. Can you run through those numbers again for us beyond the 108? I wasn't quick enough to write them down.
I'm sorry, so I misspoke. The contingency is about 3.3 million, about 4 million in FF&E, 2 million in construction management fees, 2.7 million in bond costs, which brings us to about the 120 million.
Okay, and and I see here that this is the RFP, this thing with the blue bar on it, and on the second page, 1.5.1, it calls attachment E into play here, scope of work, which I assume is this.
And so for the council's knowledge, I only printed those two things out because I felt like they were the two things that the council was going to have time to focus on tonight.
Well, the other 291 pages would have been
Correct, yeah.
over the top, not to mention. Is there some language in here that says if there's a difference in language that one piece or the other would prevail, or some mechanism to address discrepancies?
I don't know that we have that language in there. We can go back and review it again based on your feedback tonight. I do know that our council has looked very closely at it. And frankly, this piece in here about the lead silver kind of threw me because I thought that had been fixed. So now I'm questioning whether or not you have the right attachment. Anyhow, we've been very cautious about making sure that the language is consistent throughout the document.
Well, I, for one, am very happy and grateful that you're at the helm here and able to see through some of these things and catch them as we go. Let me also ask you here that on the scope of work on page 2, it says the project includes the demolition of the existing George Mason High School.
Yes.
Is that, well, maybe a better way to ask that question is how much do you estimate that would be?
I think we estimated 3 million for the
3 million.
demolition and regrading to get it site ready for the next project.
So it's ostensibly a commercial off-taker, someone interested in the economic development piece could have perhaps another idea. And during the course of this, it could be a deductive $3 million.
I think that in theory that is a good point that can be made. One thing is it could obviously impact the overall amount that could be collected. They could take it off the top. Or the greater concern I think we have from the school side is having the school sit there for too long. So having control over when it's demolished matters to us. So if there were a way to structure the deal to make sure that it was actually taken down in a timely way, I think that would be important.
Okay.
But your point's well made.
Good, thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Hardy? And then we'll go to public comment.
Just one more thing in case we have a version control issue. On page 9 of 29 on the actual RFP, that's another place where I think 9.1.5 where it mentions lead silver.
Yep.
So
Thank you. Everywhere you see silver, think gold.
everywhere we see gold, lead platinum.
Let's go from silver to gold first, Ms. Hardy.
I'm just saying on 9.1.5 you mentioned lead gold, so if as kind of the aspiration. So if we are saying gold is the standard, then is platinum the aspiration?
All right, let's go ahead. Unless we have any pressing comments, why don't we go to our one speaker? Ross Lichtenhouse, were you ready to speak? Would you like to come up? Yeah. Welcome.
So just a couple comments, starting specifically with the procurement process, and I'm not completely educated on how that takes place. I was going to take those credit cards and use them later. But I think it's important, just given the expediency of the discussion here, since the election and the approval of the bond referendum, that we make every effort to promote this RFP amongst the construction and development community, because you're talking about issuing an RFP on November 30th. That doesn't give or provide a whole lot of time for this to be disseminated amongst qualified developers and folks on the construction. And I would just tell you, from the last few months leading up to the election, having a discussion over both the school piece as well as the commercial development piece, there are still very few folks that I would consider potentially qualified that have any knowledge of this discussion taking place. Obviously, it's been discussed through and through here leading up to November, but I think it's important from a city perspective and a communication perspective that this RFP gets disseminated as many places as possible, and whether that's through the natural channels that we go through, social media, Washington Business Journal. I think we need to generate as much competition as possible, because when we kind of reverse engineer to the $108 million number for hard and soft cost, I don't think we leave ourselves enough room for competition, and obviously creating as much competition through interest as possible to drive down that cost is going to be incredibly important. And so that's a pretty heavy lift from where we are today, really only being about a week out from an RFP perspective, to make sure that the real estate community understands that this RFP is coming and that we generate as much interest as possible, because having worked from a procurement standpoint myself, when you know that there's a limited audience, you may not be quite as aggressive in terms of your pricing and creative in your design necessarily, if you think that it's really been relegated to kind of a small area of visibility. So that'd be my first comment. The second would be, I think in terms of the evaluation process and whether you want to get this granular in terms of the RFP itself, it's important that we look for someone that can build that high school that not only has experience building academic institutions of the quality that we expect, but also has experience working across jurisdictions, because regardless of the fact that this is happening somewhat within a vacuum in our own school system, being so close to Fairfax County with some overlap on the commercial side, as well as eventually having to bring in, whether it's at the beginning of the school process or at some part towards the latter end when the commercial development starts, working with WMATA, Fairfax County, UVA, Virginia Tech on the ground lease property. I think it's important for us to vet that commercial component as well as the ability to interact and communicate and have that experience interacting and communicating with other entities other than just building this school in a vacuum, because that communication is going to be absolutely critical to make sure that we get both pieces done and get it done as cost effectively as possible. Because I personally, and I know I speak for a lot of folks in the community, even though we have a mandated $120 million, I think there are a lot of folks that would like to see us make that happen for a lot less, or at least a reasonably lower amount than 120. And I think that's a great way to do it, by starting with the right type of experienced company to build a school. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to speak at this time? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Come on back up if you like. Mr. Lichtenhouse actually had, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just had a late comment.
Sure.
Sorry. Dr. Noonan, in the scope of work anywhere, do we make a reference to the commitment we expect the builder to make to the executive committee process, the governing committee process?
Do we make a commitment, or do we make a comment?
Do we make a comment about it? Because I know we make, we make a number of comments about preference will be given to, proposals that demonstrate a thoughtful consideration of the transition between commercial and the school. But I think that we also need to be upfront about the fact that we are expecting a commitment to our process, and that we should be transparent about that, and people should be prepared to make that. I think doing business in the city is a little different than doing it in other jurisdictions.
Good point. Thank you.
I had it written down, but I wanted to echo Mr. Lichtenhouse's comment, particularly as relates to metro adjacent. I think this procurement is a little bit different in some ways than other procurements, because we have metro right next to us, which actually can help with issues like parking and some of the other things that make this school, I think, a little bit different than almost any other school in Northern Virginia. There's very few schools in Northern Virginia that have the kind of metro adjacency that we do. And so I think that's something we wouldn't want to leave on the table. In other words, access to Metro. Maybe people, we don't need as much parking because teachers and other people might be able to take Metro, staff take Metro in. So anyway, I think that's something that ought to be made mention as well in the RFP is someone who has experience in Metro adjacent sites. But I agree as well as it relates to all the other parcels and properties.
One point of note, just to be responsive to previous comments, it's amazing what passing a bond does when you go to your state conference and how many friends you make almost instantly. So I recently attended with the school board, the Virginia School Boards Association, which is thick with design build firms putting on, I was invited to more dinners and lunches than you can shake a stick at. Of course, didn't take any of them, just for the record. But what I will say is that I had no less than 10 design build firms approach me and ask me about the project. So it's clearly out there, at least among that subset of school design build firms that are out there. So I'm excited about, I was excited about the number of people that wanted to be my friend, to be honest, and I think that that's good for the city.
Well, we want to be your friend too, so. All right, are there any other questions or comments from anyone up here? Mr. Z?
I think all of us here, given the short time that we've had to look at this and digest and react to it, come up with an admirable set of things, and obviously we need to get out of here so that we don't have more suggestions, but I do want to amplify what the mayor said with respect to transit-oriented perspectives. If you put that in as a expression of preference, it may go some ways towards giving you additional cost savings. I'm sure great architects and designers out there will think of this as well, but if you put that in there, they'll naturally gravitate to that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions for Dr. Noonan? Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate you sharing, and we appreciate the chair of the school board and other folks from the schools here as well. So thank you all for coming out. We look forward to working with you all.
The honeymoon continues.
All right, so let's move on now, if we can, to business not on the agenda. Is there any business not on the agenda? How about standing and regional committee and council liaison reports? Ms. Oliver?
If I could just ask a question of my fellow council members, was there anyone else who was planning to attend Friday's Budget and Finance Committee meeting? The members of the committee. Okay, all right. There's a potential scheduling conflict, and I just wanted to be aware whether everyone was planning to come or I only needed to work around a few schedules.
Can somebody remind me, when is the Economic Working Group meeting?
We have posted it for Thursday because we wanted to avoid the conflict with the Budget and Finance meeting. We haven't gotten full confirmation from all the members of the Economic Working Group that they can meet on that Thursday. We're going to get that nailed down and get notice out to everybody as soon as possible. It has been publicly noticed, so we can legally meet on Thursday morning.
So as of right now, the Economic Working Group meets Thursday morning at 8 o'clock, 7:30, sorry, and the Economic Development Committee meets after that at 9. And Budget Finance may or may not meet on Friday. Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other reports? Mr. Snyder?
Just a request. I'll be on business travel returning on December 4, but after the NVTC's legislative meeting and then the NVTC meeting later that week. I'll be on business travel, so if we can find a council member who's available to go, that would be great to both of those. And then the following week, I will be back for the NVTA meeting. And then finally, I think in our legislative program, we'll be looking at a lot of transportation funding issues, both statewide and metro. So that I don't think there's any need for that, but at some point we need a discussion on the city's position on metro funding, a more detailed discussion, because there are a lot of ideas floating around, and I just want to make sure that those of us who are representing the city are representing the council's views on that. So, thanks.
Ms. Hardy?
My request is also regarding the legislative program. So before the General Assembly meets, I think we've had discussions about wanting to see the ledge program this year. So probably need to schedule sometime before the end of the year to discuss what our plan is.
Okay, anything else? Let's move on to council member comments. Any council member comments that weren't made earlier? No minutes to be approved this time. Is there anything else anyone wants to say before we adjourn?
Mayor, move to adjourn.
Have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, the ayes have it. We are adjourned.